I had never imagined that a simple gesture could disrupt the balance of my life so profoundly. It was a stifling afternoon where time seemed to drag, and every movement felt like an effort. I had spent the morning grappling with dust and clutter, trying to get the house in order. Instead of finding satisfaction, however, all I felt was a mounting exhaustion, the kind that seemed to settle deep in my muscles like a weight too heavy to lift. The realization of my growing age pressed on me like an anchor, holding me in place. Steve, my husband, had already left for work, leaving me alone with my thoughts. I decided to rest, hoping that a brief nap might revive my energy. But just as I lay down, there was a knock at the door. It was my nephew, Eric. He was in his mid-20s, attractive and self-assured. When I met his eyes, something in his expression gave me pause. It was a subtle shift, barely noticeable, but enough to make me sense that he was looking at me differently than he had before. "You look tired," he said softly, his voice filled with genuine concern. I tried to suppress a smile, knowing that the weariness in my half-closed eyes betrayed me. There was something remarkable about Eric. He wasn't just a typical young man. He seemed to understand me on a deeper level, offering empathy that few others did. "Do you want to relax?" he asked, extending his hands toward me. An inner conflict flared up immediately. His offer seemed sincere, but there was something unsettlingly intimate in the tone of his voice. As he positioned himself behind me, his hands rested gently on my shoulders, and I shivered involuntarily. The touch was more personal than I had anticipated. I tried to ease into it, though the tension in the air only seemed to heighten, reversing the usual dynamic between us. This wasn't the type of interaction I expected with my nephew, yet a part of me was surrendering to it with each passing moment. Eric began massaging my shoulders, his hands gliding smoothly across my back. Each stroke awakened sensations I hadn't felt in ages, as though he were drawing me into an unfamiliar realm. My body reacted instinctively, reawakening senses dulled by time and routine. I couldn't quite grasp what was happening, nor could I fully understand the emotions stirring inside me. "You're incredibly strong," he murmured, his voice trembling slightly as if issuing a subtle challenge. His words sent a jolt of something exhilarating through me, making me question how I had allowed myself to deny certain needs for so long. I felt his warm breath brush my neck, and that's when I realized this had shifted far beyond a simple massage. It had become something far more intimate. Seconds stretched into tense moments as his hands moved lower, igniting a confusing mix of sensations in my chest. I could feel my body tightening in response, caught in an internal struggle as conflicting desires waged war within me. His touch seemed to dissolve every fear and doubt, leaving only the raw need to be fully present in this moment. His hands continued exploring, finding sensitive spots on my back that either comforted or ignited something much deeper, something that had long been dormant. I wanted to pull away, yet my body leaned toward him, unable to distinguish where the line between acceptable and forbidden lay. It became clear to me that this moment was pivotal, one that would alter our relationship forever. Every other thought faded into the background, replaced by an ever-mounting tension that thrummed directly through my core. Something about this moment, this clash of emotions, felt inescapable. Though I hesitated, unsure of what lay ahead, I found myself prepared to face the unknown. I tried to move, but Eric's hands held me firm, keeping me anchored to the bed. The tension between us deepened, pulling me toward a mysterious, yet strangely enticing abyss. I was overwhelmed by a whirlwind of conflicting emotions. Fear, excitement, and longing merging in an unpredictable storm. I lifted my head to meet his gaze, and his eyes burned with an intensity I didn't recognize. The compliant, familiar version of Eric was gone. The way he looked at me, dark, brooding, both frightened and drew me in. The atmosphere between us grew heavier, like the charged air before a thunderstorm. The desire hanging in the room was palpable, so overpowering that my mind fought to resist, even as my body craved connection. He began to speak of how I was always strong for others, always sacrificing my own happiness. His words pierced through me, rekindling a spark I hadn't felt in years. They captivated me, pulling my attention fully to him. Even as doubt and confusion gnawed at me, his hands continued to move with a slow, deliberate intimacy. His touch descended lower, approaching a line that made my heart race. I froze, my pulse pounding erratically in my chest. A wave of contradictory emotions surged within me. Fear, exhilaration, uncertainty, all colliding in a way that sent shivers through my entire body. His breath brushed against my ear, raising goosebumps along my skin. I found myself momentarily paralyzed, unsure whether to flee or stay. I was enveloped in a torrent of emotions, compassion and terror intertwining in a dizzying cycle. My thoughts blurred into a singular sensation, erasing the detachment I had clung to for so long. Joy and fear battled fiercely within me. Eric's touch became bolder, more overwhelming, leaving me caught between wanting to escape and longing to embrace the intensity of it all. A dormant curiosity stirred inside me, a hunger to know what it felt like to be truly, unmistakably alive. I released a deep breath, hoping to calm the storm within me. Yet the tension lingered, thick and unrelenting. In that moment, I realized I was standing at a crossroads, uncertain of what lay on the other side. At that point, my mind became overwhelmed with memories of my past struggles to be open and trust others. I wanted to scream, but the sound remained trapped in my throat. His gentle fingers brushed across my back, causing my breathing to quicken. I watched as his hands, steady and reassuring, moved in a deliberate, almost rehearsed rhythm over my body. Each touch seemed to deepen the connection between us, the enchantment of that intimacy stripping away the defenses I had spent years building. Inside, my internal conflict grew, unsure of how to create distance while fearing that I was losing the ability to resist the increasingly powerful pull toward him. I met his gaze, searching for his intentions, but his eyes betrayed no judgment or malice. Instead, they reflected something that fanned the flames of my already heightened emotions. In that moment, our interaction shifted beyond mere confusion. It became a journey into the unknown. His whispered words urged me to let go and immerse myself in the present. Suddenly, everything stopped. He withdrew his hands, breaking the tension that had stretched between us like an overdrawn string. It was as if all the weight in our hearts had been released. The strange collision of familiar boundaries and this dangerous new reality left me struggling to catch my breath. I wasn't sure if Eric expected me to fully grasp that this encounter had become something much more than a casual gesture. It was an intimate moment that hinted at the beginning of something profound and unfamiliar. I stood there, hesitating, unsure of what I should do next. Everything around me seemed to shift as if the night itself promised to bring life-altering changes. Each passing second stretched endlessly. But deep down, I knew the transformation had already begun. I could no longer ignore my desires. Eric was no longer just my nephew. Our connection had grown into something far more significant. This chaotic evening forced me to confront my true feelings, dissolving the barriers I had clung to for so long. When Eric's hands stopped, the room seemed suspended in a strange stillness, charged with expectation. Time felt both fleeting and heavy, while my mind raced with conflicting emotions. His gentle touch, the warmth in his gaze, and the wonder he awakened within me made me abandon all logic. I understood then that this was no fleeting encounter. It had become far more than I was ready to admit. Snapping back to reality, I stood abruptly, summoning all my resolve. I firmly guided Eric to the door, though the moment stretched on endlessly. As I closed it behind him, I was weighed down by a mix of regret and unfulfilled longing. Yet, a voice inside me whispered that this wasn't truly over. Indeed, a few days later, Eric returned. This time, the visit carried even more significance. Once again, my husband left for work, and Eric and I were left alone. The guilt and apprehension within me swelled like a haunting memory that wouldn't fade. But alongside those feelings were the powerful emotions of desire and passion that consumed my thoughts. Within just a few weeks, our secret encounters became a regular occurrence. We created a hidden world that belonged solely to us, meeting during Steve's work hours. Each visit heightened our unspoken connection, deepening our understanding of one another. Our bond resembled a magnetic force, drawing us together through layers of emotions, fears, and desires. These moments often began in the kitchen, where his kisses would trail from my neck to my shoulders before leading us to the living room. There, amidst the shifting shadows, our passion burned brightly, reigniting something within me. It became an essential part of my daily life. One time we found ourselves sharing a kiss in the bathtub. The feel of his lips against mine, enveloped by water, carried the weight of a hidden truth. Those moments, though secretive, were unforgettable, dangerous but intoxicating. Still, as time passed, I became increasingly aware that this path could only lead to destruction. Each morning as my husband left the house and Eric and I were left alone, The weight of shame grew heavier on my shoulders. I found myself caught between the intensity of my emotions and a responsibility I couldn't easily escape. One morning, as dawn filtered through the windows, I realized I could no longer hide from what was happening. This wasn't just about physical attraction anymore. It had transformed into an emotional dependence. I knew we couldn't keep going like this, risking not only our lives, but those of others around us. It was then that I faced the inevitable. I looked into Eric's eyes and something inside me broke open. It was time to confront the truth. With a surge of determination, I decided to confess everything to my husband. When I told Steve about Eric and the events of the past few weeks, he looked at me with a mix of shock and sorrow. His expression, filled with anguish, pierced my heart. I knew my actions had caused him deep pain, but I also knew I couldn't continue to carry this burden in silence. Though the truth hurt both of us, it set something in motion, a transformation I had not anticipated. Steve left for a while, giving me space to grapple with my own guilt and frustration. I found myself at the center of a whirlwind, torn between remorse and an unexpected sense of liberation. I understood then that in order to move forward, I had to reconcile with myself and the contradictions I had created. Despite the pain, this betrayal led me to a deeper understanding. It forced me to open my heart and confront the truths I had long buried. This moment of clarity began to change not only me, but also the relationships I had with both men. Though the process was painful, it taught me an invaluable lesson in prioritizing myself. As the evening stretched on, I reflected on the doors I had closed in my past and recognized that I was now opening new ones. Fear would no longer confine me. This story wasn't merely a chapter in my life. It marked a shift in how I understood love, passion, and self-acceptance. Learning to truly love myself had become the most crucial journey of all, heralding the start of a brighter, more authentic path forward.